Okay, so welcome. We are this week, Parshat Vayeshev. The portion of the week is Vayeshev. Vayeshev means to sit. What happens is that um, Yaakov settles down and he's hoping to have a nice, quiet life, but that's not going to happen. Peaceful life is so the family, him and his family, they settled in the land of Canaan and they continue shepherding. They are shepherds. Yosef, we know, is Yaakov's beloved son. He's his youngest before Benjamin was born, but he is Rachel's son, and he is uh, the most beloved by his father, because actually Rachel was his favorite wife, and and she passed away in childbirth, giving birth to Benjamin. Now his brothers didn't really like him. A few reasons why he didn't like them. We'll talk about that afterwards. But it could be that they were jealous because his father used to teach him. Remember, his father, 14 years, went to the yeshiva, and he was learning in the yeshiva of Shem and Ever. Everything he learned in the yeshiva, he was teaching Yosef, because Yosef was very smart. And so they must have been very envious, and little by little, and also he hung around the Bilhah and Zilpah, the concubines, how do you call them? He hung around with their children, with the shifchot, and because so there's friction between them the whole time.
Who is they?
Joseph.
Joseph
he
hung around
he hung around
Shimon.
the children of Bilhah and Zilpah, not Leah's children.
Because there was friction.
There was friction, yeah. They were envious and jealous. So there was another reason was that he used to tattletale on them. He would tattletale to his father, and he would say, they do all kinds of things, and the truth of the matter is, it looked that way, but it really wasn't. I mean, they were righteous people. We said Yaakov's children were all very righteous, but there were certain things that they did that didn't look right, and Joseph would go to his father and tattletale on them, and so that made them even more angry at him.
Annoying.
Very annoying. So then Joseph has two dreams, and he comes along and he tells them their dreams, and that just added to the brothers' jealousy. So it escalates. So the first dream, let me tell you what he dreams about. The first dream is that the brothers are binding sheaves, of wheat in the field, and Joseph's sheaf stands upright, and all the others are bowing to him. Oh. So that angered them, and they said, "Oh, you're going to also reign over us? You're going to rule us?" And their resentment, of course, grows. His second dream, he dreams the sun and the moon and 11 stars are bowing to him. So he goes and tells them this dream. So not enough the first dream, comes along the second dream, and what that implies is that his mother and his father, Jacob, are going to join the 11 brothers, and they're all going to bow down to him, which we know happens at the end, right, when he was in Egypt. But Yaakov gets angry at him, and he understands that he's not really boasting, and he understands that there's something there, but he doesn't want the jealousy of the brothers, and he says to him, listen, his mother is not alive anymore. So, which mother is this? And anyway, it says he keeps this in mind, Jacob, and he's waiting to see what's going to unfold. Like, he knows that something's going to happen. There's something behind this. But the brothers really, really are resentful. So what happens next is that the brothers go off with their sheep. They travel to Shechem to graze their sheep. And Joseph remains home. He used to sit with his father, and he would learn with him. And there was another thing about Joseph. He was very, very good looking. He was actually very pretty. And he used to stand in front of the mirror, and he would curl his hair, and he would, he would fix himself up. And also, so that was another reason why so all these things together Okay. So now he remains home, and his father tells him, "Can you go check up on your brothers and let me know what's with them?" Now Joseph knows that his brothers could kill him. They know that they're angry at him, and he says, "Okay, whatever his father wants." Um, I just want to remind you that Reuven, who was the eldest, he um, he tells them, instead of killing, like they say, "Oh, here he's coming, let's kill him," and they're looking for ways how they can do it that it's not illegal, So Reuven says, he says, "You know what? Let's throw him into the pit," because in his mind he's the oldest and he knows he's going to take the blame. So he says, "Let's throw him in the pit, and I'll come back when they're not looking, and I'll take him out and bring him back to his father. This way I'll save him." That was his intention. So they agreed, and they put him in the pit.
What was the purpose of the ruse?
What the
Was
purpose
he
of throwing
trying to get in good with his dad, or what? Why
Joseph?
did he do it? Why did he throw him in the pit and then pull him out?
No, Reuven was afraid of hurting his father. He's the oldest, and he says, "I'm going to take the blame." So he says, we shouldn't really kill him. So I'll take him out. And he didn't say anything because the brothers were really angry.
Yeah.
Let's throw him in the pit. Meanwhile, let's let them calm down, and then I'll come when they don't see, and I'll take him out. And so he persuaded them, and they agreed. Now, they took off his father had made for him a special coat, a multicolored coat, and they took off the coat and they threw him in the pit without the coat. Okay, and they're sitting there and they're eating, and all of a sudden they see there's a caravan of Yishmaelim, of traders, traveling, and Reuven wasn't there because for two reasons. Either Reuven went to daven, he was praying that Hashem should forgive him for what he did with his father's bed with the dudaim. If you remember, when he sold those, when he gave those dudaim to Rachel, and he moved his father's bed to his mother's tent, so he felt that he had to do tshuva for that, and he was praying, or it was his turn to serve his father. They used to take turns; someone had to be there to serve the father. So he wasn't there when it happened. He didn't see that they took him out of that Yehuda says to them, he says, "What are we going to gain out of it? We'll kill him. He's in the pit." And by the way, it says the pit had no water. The pit is empty and has no water. So Rashi says, well, if it's empty, it has no water, right? Why does it have to say extra, has no water? And Rashi says it didn't have water, but it had akravim and nechashim. It had snakes and scorpions. So this is a very interesting point, and I want to stand on it because when you say a bore, it's a pit. Your head is like a pit, What in a sense, when you say somebody has a good head and he takes everything in Hebrew they say bor sud shalom ma'abed tipa, you don't lose anything. It collects everything. It's like a pit that collects everything. So when your head is empty, and it means it doesn't have water. Water is the Torah. The Torah is always compared to water. So if you don't have a Torah, you can have snakes and scorpions. You can have everything that's negative. You can have all kinds of negative thoughts and all kinds of negative ideas in your head. So when you want someone to get rid of the negative ideas, fill up the head with Torah, fill it up with water, and then there's no room for any negative stuff. And you should know that in the education system, they're always talking about prevention, right? To prevent, and the more they talk about preventing, the more things happen. Or like leaving the babies in the cars, and the more they talk about it, the more it happens. And the idea of the prevention, let's say in school, they talk about violence, and they say bullying. How do we stop the kids from bullying each other? How do we stop them from violence? And the more they talk about it, the worse it gets. And the idea is,
You have a chance to
the idea is
hot water, just hot water. Yeah,
to fill up to change their state of mind. In other words, what we did was we made active recess.
More? Yeah.
Wait, one second. One second.
Yeah, I should have eaten all that. I hope I don't have a reaction. It was good. Tea. Just hot water.
Sorry about that. Okay, so what we did was we made like active recess where children were in charge of giving out the balls and the tennis rackets, and they were in charge of making groups and games, and they were so busy they had no time to fight. You just, there was no violence. So you have to get involved. So when a person has all kinds of negative thoughts, he just has to think about positive things. He has to, and when you're learning Torah and you fill it up with good deeds, there's no time for all these negative thoughts to come in. So they threw him into this pit, and then Yehuda says, what are we going to gain out of it? There's these Ishmaelim that are coming, this caravan of these traders, let's sell him. And instead of killing him, this way we get rid of him and we make money on the deal.
And he's not dead.
And he's not dead. Not we killed him. Like, we don't care if they kill him, So that's what they did. And he was sold to the Ishmaelim. And it's interesting, they always used to come with like neft, with bad smelling neft, gasoline or whatever, here they came with spices. See, Hashem made it special that Yosef should have to travel with a good smelling stuff. So there was all kinds of spices and cinnamon, and there's like a list of good smelling things that
he got a good caravan.
That he got a good caravan. But they actually sold him to someone else, to the Midianim, and they sold him. He ended up being a slave in Egypt. So he was sold a couple times. He went from one caravan to the next until he finally comes to Egypt as a slave. You could imagine that all this is God's doing, that he eventually, the Jews have to go to Egypt. Right? This is the way our history went. So Reuven comes back, and he had in mind that he's taking him out of the pit. And can you imagine what he feels when he opens the pit and there's no one there? And he says, what happened? He thought that he was dead. And he tears his clothes. And he says, what are we going to tell our father? So what the brothers did was they took his coat and they dipped it in a goat's blood, because they say the goat's blood is the closest to human blood. And they brought it to Jacob, and they said, he thought obviously a wild animal devoured his son. And Yaakov was heartbroken, and he tears his garments, and he refuses to be comforted. And here we know that when a person is not dead, you can't be comforted. Hashem gives you the special ability to be comforted if somebody passes away, and to be able to forget. I mean, you don't really forget, but you can continue on your life. But here he was alive, and so there was no way he was going to be comforted. The parsha suddenly makes us turns off to tell us about Yehuda. What happened was that they saw the pain of their father, and they came to Yehuda and they said, it's your fault.
Your idea.
Because it was your idea that we sell him. And if you wouldn't have told us to sell him, if you would have convinced us to bring him back home, we would have done it. We would have listened to you. Yehuda was the strong one of the brothers. So he feels, that brothers are angry at him. So he takes himself and leaves. He goes to live somewhere else. And he also sees his father's grief, and so he goes off to with his with a partner nearby, and he settles down and he gets married, and he has 3 sons. And the Torah tells us about his 3 sons for a reason, because his first son was Er, the next one was Onan, and his youngest son was Shelah. Now the Torah tells us about Tamar. Tamar was a very righteous woman from Shem, the granddaughter,
Shem.
I guess, of Shem, yeah. And she marries Er. She is very interested in having children from Yehuda because she knows that Mashiach is coming from Yehuda. They got the blessing of the kings, and the Mashiach, the King Mashiach will be from Yehuda. So she marries Er. Now Er thinks she's a very beautiful woman, and he's afraid that she's going to get pregnant and maybe gain weight, and she won't be so beautiful. So he spills the seed, which is a terrible sin, because you're taking life. It's like killing. It's actually killing, because it's
deceiving her.
It's a potential of life that Hashem gives us. There's nothing like it. It's like unlimited power, and you just destroy it. It's like that's
How do you spell his name in English? Er.
Er.
Just Er. Thank you.
Okay, so Hashem kills him. He dies, and nobody really knows why. Right? So Yehuda says, okay, her son died. There's no children. There's a law in the Torah that if your husband dies and you don't have children from him, and he has a brother, you want to continue the name, so you could marry the brother. It's yibum, and if not, then there's a process of chalitza, which if they're not interested in getting married, but if they are, it's a mitzvah to marry the brother, to have children in your brother's name. So she marries Onan. Yehuda's very happy to give her the next son, Onan. Now he does the same thing, because he says, I don't want to have a son that's going to be on my brother's name, my brother who died. So he also spills the seed. And the Torah says it's like a wicked, it's being wicked, really. So he also dies. So Yehuda says, well, this woman she's definitely, she's killing all her husbands. So I'm going to give my youngest son, and he might also die. Like, he has no idea why they're dying, right? And so he says to her, you know what? You go back home, sit with your mother, your parents, go home. And when Shayla grows up, I'll let you marry him. But he had no intention of giving her Shayla, which she knew. So Tamar devises a plan. She says, you know what? Yehuda's wife, meanwhile, passes away. So Yehuda is available. Okay, he's a widow. So she says, she disguises herself as a prostitute. She puts a scarf over her face. So he had no idea who she was. And the Torah tells us that she actually was so modest that even when she was married to his sons, he never really saw her face, because she always had it covered. So he had no way of dreaming that this was her. She went to meet him. She heard that Yehuda went with his partner or his friend to supervise the shearing of the sheep.
I thought he died by this time.
Who, Yehuda?
Yeah.
No, the husbands, the sons, the two sons died.
Oh, the two sons died.
The two sons died. So the father, this is the father.
Right.
So he meets her on the way. She sits on the way, and Yehuda, you see how Hashem put the thought into his head to go towards her, and she says he had no idea who she was, and he I don't know how to say it in English, okay? I don't know if it's being seduced, but like, she agrees on a condition, like, what are you going to give me for it?
Mm-hmm.
So he promises like payment. He says, I'll give you sheep, but she says, give me a collateral. Meanwhile, like, how do I know that I'm going to get it? Because he doesn't have the sheep with him. He's going to, like, I'll find you later and bring you the sheep. She says, give me something, a mashkon, give me a collateral. So a deposit. So he leaves his ring, like the seal of the Yehuda, his ring is a tabad. He leaves a staff, a stick, and also it says, like, maybe it's his cape or something that he wears. Okay, and he leaves. Meanwhile, Tamar gets pregnant. And she goes back home. She takes off the clothes that she put on. She had changed her clothes. She used to wear like a widow's, I guess, I don't know what she wore, but here she changed her clothes and she went back home. Like nobody knew it was her and nobody knew what happened. And all of a sudden, 3 months pass and they say, guess what? Your daughter-in-law's pregnant. Oh, how could she be pregnant? So she actually sinned because he had no idea that was him, right? So he's sure that she sinned, and she's the daughter of a Kohen, and so he pronounces execution. They're going to burn her.
Who's he?
Yehuda.
Yehuda. Okay.
So he says, we're going to kill her. So, but before they carry out the punishment, Tamar sends Yehuda all the items that he left her. And she doesn't say it out loud. Like she sends it to him, that's it. And she says, I became pregnant from who these objects belong to. And he had the option to keep it quiet because, actually what I meant to say was he sent his partner to go back to the mountain of where she was sitting, Timnah or something, where she was sitting, and give the sheep and get his objects back. But he couldn't find anyone. And he asked around, he said, where's the prostitute that was sitting here? And they said, there is no one that we know. So he came back and he said, listen, I looked for her and I can't find her. So he says, you know what? I did my best. I'm not going to go asking anymore because then it's going to become, too open and So I'll just keep quiet about it. And okay, so she has my objects. And here she sends back these objects and he realizes, wow, that's him, that's her. Then she doesn't deserve to be burnt. And he says, Tzadkahi mimeni, she's more righteous than me. And he didn't punish her. So he acknowledges his error, which was a big, big thing for a person to be able to acknowledge in public. It was me.
Did they ever discover that the sons were not impregnating her, that were spilling their seed? Did that come out?
Maybe. Well, the Torah tells us, so I guess
somebody knows.
Somebody knows. And Tamar gives birth to twins.
Oh.
And she has twin boys, and it says that when one of them stuck his hand out, and so the nurse put a red string around his hand to know that this is the one that's first. Then he's put his hand back in, and the other one pushed himself out, and that's why she called him. Yaakov called him Peretz. Peretz is like paratz, like you broke loose. You jumped out first, and so his name is Peretz, and the second one is Zerach. Zerach is like shines like this, maybe. Anyway, they both became righteous leaders in Israel. They were both very, very righteous. So this was the story that was stuck in between the story of Joseph. Okay, now we go back to Joseph. So we told the story about Yehuda and Tamar, and now we go back to Joseph. So Joseph is sold to Potiphar. Remember, he came to Egypt, right? So they sell him to Pharaoh's chief butcher. Okay, and this guy realizes that Joseph is very talented, and he really likes him. And he says, "You know what? I'm going to entrust you with managing my household." He's in charge of his whole household. Potiphar's wife becomes infatuated with Joseph. He was very beautiful. He was only 17 years old. Remember, he was very young when he was sold. And so she attempts to seduce him. And Joseph resists. And of course, he came to the house one day and she held on to his jacket. And so he got himself out of the jacket and she's stuck with the jacket and he ran out. What does she do? She claims that it's the other way around. Okay, she had to get out of it. She was sort of rejected, and so she accuses him of assault. Here, you see, he assaulted me, and she presents his garment as an evidence. And so they put him in prison. That's how Joseph gets to prison. Potiphar says, "Oh, if that's the case, okay, in prison." And even in prison, he finds favor in everybody. Wherever he goes, he's He's everybody's favorite. There's something about Joseph that, he's always positive. Even when he was in prison, you never hear him complaining. You never hear once. He went through a hard life. Never once did he complain. Even later when the brothers come and they say, oh, we're so sorry, he says, it's Hashem's doing, don't be sorry. All this came from Hashem. So he's in prison, and now in prison, he goes around like he sees these two officials that were in prison, and they look up, their faces, like all upset. And so he sees them with troubled expressions on their faces. So he says, like, what's the problem? Maybe I can help you. Could you imagine? He's in the same situation, but he seems like he's going to help them. And so they tell him that they had a dream, and they ask him to interpret their dreams. So one of them was the one who used to pour the wine for the king, the cupbearer. And so he says in his dream he saw a vine with 3 black branches that blossom, and they produce grapes. And he presses the grapes into Pharaoh's cup, and he gives it to him. And Joseph says that means that in 3 days, you're going to be restored to your position. And the reason why he was put in prison was because they found like a fly or some bug in the cup of wine. And the reason they're going to forgive him and restore his position is because it can always just fall in. But then comes the baker. Now the baker shares his dream. And his dream, there are 3 baskets on his head. And in the top basket, there are baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds come and they eat from it. So Joseph says that the 3 baskets also are 3 days, and Pharaoh's going to execute the baker, and the birds will eat his flesh. Now, why did the baker get a worse? Why was he executed and not the other one? Because he found the bug in the dough. So when you're baking, you have to bake. If someone's going to find that, that's definitely the baker's fault. It doesn't just fly into the dough. So that's why he was less lenient with him. And 3 days later, it was Pharaoh's birthday, and the dream comes true. And the one who pours the wine was reinstated, and the baker's executed. And before he's released, Joseph says to him, please do me a favor and remember me to the king, to the Pharaoh, and get me out of prison. But he forgets. And he forgets, and the reason he forgets is because Hashem says, don't rely on anybody. Don't rely on people. You should have relied only on Hashem. And being that you asked for you think your help is going to come from him, you should turn to Hashem, because he was such a great tzaddik. I mean, we always ask for intervention and ask for people to intervene for us. But I guess on the level that Joseph was, he should have, put his trust totally in Hashem. And he stayed in prison an extra 2 years because of that. So I wanted to go back to talk about Joseph, where I mentioned that he was put in charge of the prison, and interprets the dreams of the fellow prisoners. His talent for dream interpretation, we find later when Pharaoh calls him. When Pharaoh has a dream, suddenly this guy remembers, hey, there's a guy in prison who knows how to interpret dreams, and that's how he got out. And then of course he plays a very crucial role in saving Egypt from famine. There was the 7 years. His dream was there was 7 years of prosperity, and then there's 7 years of famine, and he actually saved his own family too. Throughout this whole ordeal, we say he never once expressed self-pity. Not once did he say, poor me, why does it always happen to me? Why not someone else? And he, there's these things that they people have on their desk. Sometimes I'm having a nervous breakdown. I earned it. I deserve it. No one has a right to take it away from me. Well, he never said that. He never complained, never. So the Rebbe once spoke about this whole story of Yosef, and analyzing the story, he highlights a very interesting thing, and he says that while in prison, the fact that Joseph sees the butler and the baker with their faces looking, so he says to them, "Why do you look so sad today? Do you have a problem? Can I help?" Which is amazing because first of all, these guys were not his friends. And in fact, the Medrash says that these two guys were associates of Potiphar, and they were the men, he was the one who actually put him into prison. So they're friends of the one who got him in prison. Why do you want to help them? So you could think that Joseph would be very, very bitter and resent them. And here he's like this upbeat, chipper guy, and his only concern is that these two guys are unhappy. So the question is like, where do you get the strength? Where does that come from? And the answer is in his strong emunah, in his unwavering belief in Hashem, that Hashem was with him in this whole ordeal. Hashem is there, and he lives with this awareness that nothing happens without a reason. And he understood that what happened to him, his being sold into slavery and his being thrown into prison, or interpreting dreams for others, was all orchestrated by Hashem, and it has a reason. And he realized that divine providence puts us where we are for a purpose. If he wouldn't have been sold to slavery, if he wouldn't have been falsely accused, if he wasn't in prison for years, he never would have become the Sheni Lamelech. He never would have become he was actually the second to the king. And Egypt would not have survived this famine, and the children of Israel wouldn't have been saved. So just imagine how this is something so important, that whenever things look dark, there's always a reason, and it always leads to something good. And then when his father, after his father passes away, and his brothers come to ask him for forgiveness, that we sold you to slavery. So he says, "What am I, Hashem?" Only Hashem could see the future. And if Hashem placed me here, he placed me here to save my life, and to save your lives, and to save the lives of everybody. So don't feel bad. Hashem sent me here, and it's a good thing. So the Rebbe was telling us that we have to learn from this. Torah comes from the word hora'ah, which means it has to be a teaching. We have to learn from it, in actual life. So what do we learn from Joseph's example? That not only Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are called the patriarchs of the Jewish people, but we are also the sons of Joseph. We all carry a little bit of Joseph within us. And this gives us strength. This gives us the courage to confront any challenge that Hashem might put before us. Anything that comes our way, we understand that it stems from Hashem and it serves a divine purpose. So instead of falling into the trap of like, poor me, and why is it happening to me? And to like with the carbon, to make yourself like I'm the one who's suffering here. You have to maximize the opportunity that Hashem gives you. This is an opportunity that Hashem is giving you. And we say that the very first commandment that Hashem gave us in Bereshit was to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. So the Rebbe explained that the first mitzvah a Jew is given is to create another Jew. In other words, it's not only just bringing children into the world, it's a figure of speech that to reach out to Jews who are lost, God forbid, they're assimilated or they've forsaken their way because they're unaware of their Jewish heritage, to guide them back to the roots and create another Jew. And it's interesting that this we learned from Yosef, because when his mother called him Yosef, she said, Yosef Hashem li ben acher, that Hashem may God grant me an additional son. So on the basic level, she was expressing a desire for at least one more son, which she did have. But it also, in this prayer, she's hoping that her infant son Joseph, who was just born, will grow up to be a special kind of Jew, the kind of Jew that adds to another Jew, someone who brings Jews back to the fold of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the kind of Jew that will find a Jew who may have strayed from the path, and he brings him back and lets him rediscover his way. And so the Rebbe emphasized that the word acher means other, can refer to any person who strayed from the life of Torah. Acher, like he went the wrong way. And the Talmud tells us the story of Elisha ben Avuya, the great scholar and sage who left his studies and he left his religion, and he went on a different path. He's called Acher. And he went so far off course that he became known. This was his nickname, Acher, and because he turned away from his heritage. So Rachel's prayer, like the Rebbe explains, expresses the hope that her son Joseph, and we all have a Joseph in us, that will possess the ability to transform any wayward Jew from Acher, from another one, to a son, bring him back. Ben Acher, to bring the Acher back to be a son of Torah, a follower of Hashem's ways. And here we are now celebrating Yutet Kislev, which is the first Lubavitcher Rebbe was freed from prison, and he gave up his whole life to bring back into Yiddishkeit. And the sixth Rebbe, when the Rebbe spoke, he spoke about his father-in-law, who was the sixth Rebbe of the lineage of Chabad rabbis, and he was Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. He started the Jewish outreach in America. He came to America from Europe, and his name was Yosef. His name was Joseph. So he led this campaign to seek out all these wayward Jews and being non-judgmental, with love, unbelievable, and to bring them back to Hashem and to transform this Acher to a devoted son. So the first 17 years of his life, remember he was 17, Joseph, when he was sold. The first 17 years of his life, he studied with his father, Jacob. And then after that, either in a caravan to Egypt, or a slave in Potiphar's house, or in prison with the butler and the baker and standing before Paro and ruling Egypt, he is constantly serving and helping others. And he saves them, and he brings them back to the life of a Chaim. That's the real existence. So this mission, this Joseph's mission statement, is the one that we each have to embrace as our own. And the Parsha of Vayeshev, it always comes out between the 19th of Kislev and Hanukkah. Parshat Vayeshev is always like close to Yutet Kislev. That's the day that marks the miraculous liberation of the first Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, the one who wrote the Tanya, and he from the Tsarist Russia imprisonment, and he was in prison for 53 days, and the Tanya we know has 53 chapters. In other words, that this was above some sort of a kitrug in heaven, and finally the teaching of Hasidus thrived after he was released, and even more so than before. So nearly 100 years later, in 1897, when the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe established the first yeshiva, Tomchei Tmimim, where students would study the teachings of the Alter Rebbe, of the first Shneir Zalman, the first Rebbe of Chabad, they call them the students of the yeshiva Tomchei Tmimim. He referred to them as lamp-lighters. He said, "What is a chassid? A chassid is a lamplighter. That in one time they didn't have electricity, so they used to go to the streets and they would have a lamplighter, and he would light the lamps. And they not only on the main street, they would go in the dark simtaot, wherever very few people would be going by, and they would light the lamps. That's a chassid. He goes out of his way to make light for someone else. So he says that he intended to create an army of students who would serve with self-sacrifice, going out and igniting souls of their fellow Jews and bringing them back to Judaism. So this is something that I grew up with, and with all these mitzvah campaigns and the lamplighters going onto the streets. I mean, when I was in school, they told us wherever you go, give out candles, and there we would say, "Are you Jewish?" Here everybody, most people, but actually you have to ask it here too. But we would know that this is our job to help a fellow Jew, and 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 this is we see the result of what he did, like a single act of one person lighting up one soul. You can like, it has the power to transform someone's whole life, and the impact is for generations to come, because in igniting one candle after another, it's an ongoing chain. It doesn't end. It's like the butterfly effect, that when you throw a stone into the water and you see the ripple effect. Okay, so first of all, we'll end off saying that we should merit to truly incorporate these lessons from Joseph into our lives, and striving to be ambassadors of God in every situation. We're the shlichim, and we should all enlist in the Rebbe's army of lamplighters. And this is what we should be doing, engaging ourselves in the sacred work of adding another son, seeking out the acher, somebody who lost their way, with kindness, with love, and help them rediscover their connection to Hashem. That's our message for today.